The rain hammered the tin roof of our 900 square foot apartment in Akron, Ohio on April 3rd, 1985, like it was trying to drown out the venom in Margaret's voice. My mother-in-law stood in the doorway of our cramped bedroom, her wiry frame silhouetted against the flickering fluorescent light, her words slicing through the damp air. "Emma Carter, you're nothing but a barren leech sucking my sun dry. Faking a feint to dodge work, what a pathetic excuse for a wife." Her shrill accusations bounced off the peeling wallpaper, each one a needle pricking the dull ache at the back of my skull. I touched the spot where I'd hit the porcelain sink last night, the memory of that fall sharper than the pain itself. It wasn't just a stumble. In my past life, that sink had been my end, a desperate escape from a marriage that crushed me. But now I was awake and reborn in 1985 at 25 years old, with a second chance to rewrite my story. I opened my eyes to the familiar sagging ceiling stained from years of leaks in this rundown tenement. The calendar on the wall stuck on April 3rd confirmed it. I was back in the first year of my marriage to David, the textile mill foreman who'd charmed me with promises of a better life. My reflection in the cracked vanity mirror froze me, pale, hollow-cheeked, but not yet broken. In my previous life, David's betrayal had unraveled me. His affair with Lisa, the mill's accountant, led to a divorce that left me penniless, kicked back to my parents' crumbling farmhouse. I died in 1995 alone, shivering in an Akron alley, my dreams buried under decades of regret. But this time I knew what was coming. Tonight I'd catch David and Lisa in the mill's warehouse, their bodies tangled in a betrayal that would have shattered the old Emma. Not this Emma. This Emma had memories of a future that armed her with steel. Margaret's voice snapped me back. "David's got the worst luck in Ohio, stuck with a useless thing like you." She clutched a chipped mug of Folgers, her knuckles white. I almost laughed. Useless, I'd been a nurse in my past life, a skill I'd honed in secret after David mocked my soft hands. I'd also run a failed boutique, learning every stitch of the clothing trade before the bank foreclosed. Those lessons burned into my soul were my weapons now. I slid out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold linoleum, and grabbed my denim jacket. The weight of my past life pressed against my chest, vivid and raw. David's rise to deputy director, funded by my dowry, my depression, my death. Cruelest of all, Zach, the quiet coal delivery veteran who'd left wildflowers on my grave, had become Ohio's richest real estate mogul by 1995. I'd ignored him then. Not this time. The apartment smelled of stale cigarettes and damp laundry. Our wedding photo, David's smug grin, my naive smile, hung crookedly above the thrift store couch. I yanked it down the frame, clattering to the floor. Margaret shrieked, "You ungrateful wretch! That's my son's memory." I ignored her, my eyes catching the ceramic bowl on the kitchen counter, a wedding gift with a faded double happiness decal. I'd clung to it as a symbol of hope in my past life, even as David mocked its tackiness. Now it felt like a war trophy. I tucked it under my arm, my pulse quickening. Outside, the rain battered the rust-streaked windows, a storm that mirrored the one brewing in me. Tonight was the night. Sarah, our neighbor, had pounded on our door an hour ago, her voice cutting through the downpour. "Emma, I saw David with Lisa at the mill warehouse." I swear it on my kids' lives. I stepped into the hallway, the wooden floor creaking under my sneakers. Margaret followed her slippers, slapping the boards. "If you make a scene, I'll make sure David divorces you faster than you can blink." Her threat echoed her past life playbook. She'd forced me to sign a divorce agreement that stripped me bare, leaving me with nothing but shame. Not this time. Since my rebirth, I'd spent the last 3 nights studying Ohio's new no-fault divorce laws, scribbling a revised agreement in a spiral notebook. It demanded $3,000, Margaret's secret stash hidden in a tin box under her mattress, which I'd discovered when she'd bragged about it in my past life. That money would be my ticket out. The stairwell smelled of coal dust and mildew, the walls lined with faded union posters from the mill's better days. Akron was bleeding jobs in 1985, and imports gutted the textile industry. David's foreman role was a lifeline, but his ambition had turned him cruel. I knew his affair wasn't just lust, it was a power grab, cozying up to Lisa for her accounting tricks to climb the mill's ranks. My past life had taught me his every move. August 16, 1984, in the security room. September 3rd in the locker room. I'd memorized the dates, the lies. Now I'd use them to burn his world down. As I reached the street, the neon sign of a corner diner flickered, casting a glow over the cracked pavement. A group of mill workers huddled under an awning sharing a cigarette. One of them, a grizzled man named Joe, called out, "Emma, you okay? Looks like you're on a mission." I forced a smile, clutching the bowl tighter and settling a score, Joe. He nodded, sensing the fire in me. With its shuttered factories and weary faces, this town was my battleground now. And if you're with me rooting for Emma to rise from the ashes, hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to catch every twist of this journey. It's just getting started. The rain soaked my jacket as I ran toward the mill, my heart pounding with purpose. I wasn't the broken Emma anymore. I was reborn, and tonight I'd reclaim my life. The rain slashed across my face like 1,000 tiny blades as I sprinted through Akron's industrial district, the ceramic bowl heavy under my arm. The textile mill loomed ahead, its brick facade stained black from decades of coal smoke. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows over piles of discarded tires and coal ash heaps, remnants of a town crumbling under Reagan's economy. My sneakers splashed through puddles, each step fueled by the memory of my past life. David's smug laughter, Lisa's taunting smirk, and the divorce papers that left me with nothing but a bus ticket to nowhere. Tonight, April 3rd, 1985, I'd rewrite that ending. Sarah's words echoed David's with Lisa in the warehouse. I saw them, Emma, clear as day. In my previous life, I'd stumbled into that same scene, too shocked to act, and Margaret had pounced, forcing me to sign away my future. This time I was ready. My hand tightened around the divorce agreement in my jacket pocket, handwritten over sleepless nights since my rebirth. It cited Ohio's 1985 no-fault divorce laws demanding $3,000 from Margaret's hidden tin box money I knew David would have to cough up to save face. My past life knowledge was my weapon. I knew David's affair wasn't just a fling. He used Lisa's accounting skills to siphon mill funds, angling for a deputy director role. Every date, every lie was seared into my memory. The mill's rusted gate creaked as I slipped through the warehouse just beyond the loading dock. The air smelled of wet wool and machine oil, the hum of night shift looms faint in the distance. My heart thudded as I approached the warehouse door, its flickering bulb painting the ground in sickly yellow. I paused, gripping the bowl. Its double happiness decal is a bitter irony. I'd clutched it in my past life as David mocked my loyalty. Now it was my battering ram. I shoved the door open, and there they were, David, his foreman's cap askew, pinning Lisa against a stack of cotton bolts. Her legs were wrapped around him, her red nails digging into his back. The sight burned, but I wasn't the naive girl anymore. I swung the bowl against a metal shelf with a deafening clang, dust raining from the rafters. "Caught you, David," I shouted, my voice cutting through the storm. "The wife you bought for $300 just found you cheating in the mill." Lisa shrieked, scrambling to pull her skirt down, while David fumbled with his belt, his face flushed with panic. "Emma, you're crazy," he sputtered, his eyes darting to the door. A crowd of night shift workers gathered, their murmurs growing. I stepped forward, pulling the divorce agreement from my pocket. "Sign this," I said, my voice steady. "And that $3,000 your mom's got stashed under her mattress, that's my compensation for your lies." David lunged, trying to snatch the papers, but a figure stepped between us. Zach, the coal delivery veteran, his army jacket soaked black from the rain. His broad shoulders blocked David's path, his eyes fierce. "Back off," Zach said, his voice low but commanding. The crowd buzzed, some whispering about David's side piece. I seized the moment, holding up the papers. Last August 16th, the security room. September 3rd, locker room. "Want me to list every time you and Lisa hooked up?" Gasps rippled through the workers. Lisa's face went pale, her lipstick smeared. David's hands shook, but he grabbed the pen I offered, scrawling his name as the crowd jeered. Zach stood firm, his presence a shield. I remembered him from my past life, the quiet vet who'd delivered coal to our apartment, always polite, always watching. He'd become a real estate tycoon by 1995, but more than that, he'd mourned me, leaving wildflowers on my grave. Now his gaze held a mix of protectiveness and curiosity. The rain pounded the warehouse roof, but I felt a spark of something new: control, maybe even hope. David shoved the signed papers back at me, muttering, "You'll regret this." I tucked them away, my eyes locking on Zach. This was my chance to change everything. The rain had softened to a drizzle when I left the textile mill, the signed divorce papers tucked inside my denim jacket, still warm from David's trembling hands. The Akron streets were slick, reflecting the dim glow of streetlights as I walked the weight of my past life and this new chance pulling me forward. The warehouse confrontation had left my heart racing, not from fear, but power. David's betrayal exposed before the night shift workers was the first crack in my life that had crushed me. Standing in the shadow of the mill's smokestacks, I turned to Zach, the coal delivery veteran who'd stepped between me and David's rage. His army jacket was soaked, his broad frame steady despite the chaos. I'd barely noticed him in my past life. He was just a quiet figure hauling coal to our tenement. But I knew his future. By 1995, Zach Harper would be Ohio's real estate king, a man who'd mourned me with wildflowers on my grave. Tonight, he was my way out. I breathed the cold air sharp in my lungs and met his eyes, green-guarded but kind. Zach. I said, my voice low to keep the lingering crowd from hearing marry me. His brow furrowed, rain dripping from his buzz-cut hair. Before he could speak, I leaned closer, the ceramic bowl still under my arm like a shield. I'll make us $100,000 in 3 years. I know things, investments, opportunities. My past life knowledge was my trump card. Treasury notes issued in 1985 were about to double in value on Cleveland's black market. 2 days ago, I'd already slipped a $50 note into his coal basket, a test of my foresight. I added, "Meet me tomorrow at 8 a.m., Summit County Courthouse," pressing the note's receipt into his calloused hand. The warehouse fell silent, the workers' whispers fading under the patter of rain on the tin roof. Zach's jaw tightened, his gaze searching mine. "You're serious," he said, not a question but a realization. I nodded, my heart pounding. In my past life, I'd died alone, betrayed by David and my so-called friend Rachel. Zach had been the constant who'd seen me when I was invisible. Now his quiet strength was a lifeline. "I don't know what you're running from, Emma," he said softly, "but I'll be there." He turned, his boots crunching on gravel, leaving me with a spark of hope I hadn't felt in 2 lifetimes. The next morning, the courthouse steps were damp, the April sky gray, but clearing. Zach waited under a budding maple tree, his faded army uniform pressed as best he could manage. He held a manila envelope, our marriage application, his fingers fidgeting with the flap. I wore my only good dress, a thrift store navy shift, and the divorce papers were safely filed. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice rough but gentle. I smiled, catching the glint of a purple heart pinned inside his jacket more than ever. Inside the clerk, a woman with cat eye glasses raised an eyebrow at my fresh divorce certificate. "Second marriage already," she said, adjusting her glasses. Zach's shoulders stiffened, but I slid his purple heart across the counter. "Ma'am, this man's a Vietnam hero, first-class merit. Have you ever seen one of those?" Her eyes widened, and the stamp hit our marriage certificate with a satisfying thud. We stepped outside, the maple leaves rustling. Zach hesitated, then unpinned his medal and pressed it into my palm, his rough fingertips brushing my skin. "You deserve honor, Emma," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My throat tightened. In my past life, I'd known him only as the coal guy limping in the rain from old war wounds. Now I saw his weight scars, duty loss. I said, "This is just the start," pinning the medal to my dress. We walked to his battered Ford pickup, the divorce settlement, $3,000 in cash, hidden in my purse. Margaret's tin box had been exactly where I remembered, under her mattress, stuffed with bills she'd hoarded from David's overtime. That money was my seed, my chance to build something new with Zach. Our first stop was the veterans' housing block, a cluster of crumbling brick buildings near the mill plastered with "Support Our Troops" posters faded from the Nixon era. Zach's apartment was sparse, a cot, a radio, and a stack of dog-eared Louis L'Amour novels. A small boy peeked from the bedroom, Timmy, his adopted son about 8, with wary eyes and a too-thin frame. "Who's she?" he mumbled, clutching a worn baseball glove. Zach knelt, his voice soft. "This is Emma Buddy. She's family now." I crouched to Timmy's level, my nursing instincts kicking in from my past life. "Hey, Timmy, you like pancakes? I make a mean stack." His eyes flickered with cautious hope, but he ducked back inside. Zach's face softened. He's been through a lot. Foster homes weren't kind. I nodded, my resolve hardening. I'd protect them both, using every lesson from my past. As we unloaded my few belongings, a suitcase of clothes, my mother's silver bracelet, Zach watched me curious. "How'd you know about that treasury note?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. I grinned, pulling the receipt from my pocket. Let's say I've got a knack for numbers. In truth, my past life boutique had taught me market trends, and I'd memorized 1985's financial quirks. Treasury notes were a goldmine if you knew where to flip them. Tomorrow we hit the pawn shop, I said. Those notes are about to skyrocket. Zach's eyes were mixed with doubt and admiration, but he nodded. For the first time in 2 lives, I felt seen not as David's failure, but as Emma Carter reborn with purpose. The veterans' housing block smelled of coal dust and boiled cabbage, the walls thin enough to hear neighbors arguing over Reagan's tax cuts. Our apartment, 2 rooms, a sagging couch, and a kitchenette, was a far cry from the life I'd dreamed of with David, but it was ours. Zach's Purple Heart hung on a nail above the radio, catching the morning light. Timmy, still skittish, ate his pancakes in silence, his small hands clutching the fork like it might vanish. I watched him, my past life nursing training, whispering malnourishment, maybe trauma. In my previous life, I'd patched up factory workers in secret, hiding my skills to avoid David's mockery. Now those skills were my strength. Timmy, I said, gently sliding another pancake onto his plate. Have you ever tried maple syrup from the co-op? It's the real stuff. He glanced up, his eyes less guarded, and nodded a start. Zach returned from his coal route, his hands black with ash, his limp more pronounced in the damp spring air. Rough day, I asked, handing him a mug of instant coffee. He shrugged, but his eyes lingered on Timmy, who'd started doodling a baseball diamond on a napkin. Kid's tough, he said. Tougher than me. I learned Timmy's story that morning, an orphan from a Cleveland foster home beaten by a drunk caretaker until Zach, fresh from Vietnam, took him in. Couldn't leave him, Zach said, his voice low. Reminded me of guys I lost over there. His words hit hard. In my past life, I'd never asked about Zach's scars, physical or otherwise. Now I saw the weight of his heroism not just in medals, but in choices. I pulled the $3,000 divorce settlement from my purse, still crisp in its envelope. We're investing this, I said, spreading a notebook of calculations on the kitchen table. My past life boutique had crashed, but I'd learned about supply chains, demand spikes, and Akron's underground markets. Treasury notes hot in 1985 were my ticket. There's a pawn shop on Main Street, I said. Guy there, Eddie flips notes to Cleveland traders. We buy, now sell in July, double our money. Zach raised an eyebrow, his coal-streaked fingers tapping the table. You sound like you've done this before. I grinned, dodging the truth. Just trust me. He nodded, his faith quiet, but unshakable, unlike David's constant demands for proof. The pawn shop was a dim, hole-in-the-wall stuffed with radios and tarnished jewelry. Eddie, a wiry man with a cigar stub, smirked when I mentioned the notes. Lady, you need collateral. Banks don't trust women entrepreneurs these days. The 1980s glass ceiling stung, but I'd expected it. I slid Zach's VA card across the counter. He's a vet, Purple Heart. That enough, Eddie's smirk faded, and he nodded. We bought $2,500 in notes, leaving cash for rent and Timmy's school supplies. By July, the black market surged, netting us $5,100. Zach stared at the bills stacked on our table, his eyes wide. How'd you know? He asked. I winked. Told you I'm good with numbers. But Akron wasn't kind to dreamers. Margaret spread rumors calling me a gold digger who'd seduced a vet for cash. At the flea market, where I'd set up a stall for my children's overalls, a woman hissed, "You left a good man like David for coal money." I swallowed the hurt, focusing on my sketches. Durable denim waterproof cuffs, perfect for working-class kids. My past life boutique had taught me what sold, practical, cheap, loved. But banks rejected my loan applications, citing instability for a newly remarried woman. Zach's vet status saved us again, securing a small business license through a VA contact. You're unstoppable, he said, helping me sew late into the night, his rough hands clumsy with thread. Timmy's cough worsened one evening, his forehead burning under my palm. Zach, get cold water and a towel, I said, my nursing instincts kicking in. In my past life, I'd treated mill injuries, cuts, fevers, while David slept off whiskey. Now I cooled Timmy's fever with compresses and mixed aspirin with honey from the co-op. Zach watched, his face tight with worry. He's never had anyone care like this, his voice breaking. I touched his arm, feeling the scars beneath his sleeve. He's got us now. Timmy stirred, mumbling, "Thanks, Emma," his first absolute trust. I ruffled his hair, my heart swelling. The next day, neighbors rallied. Sarah, who'd tipped me off about David, brought fabric scraps. Margaret's full of it, she said. You're good people. Joe, the mill worker, dropped off a crate of apples. For the kid, he grunted. Their support, born of Akron's tight-knit struggle, grounded me. I sewed faster, and my overalls sold out at the market. Zach fixed our wobbly table, his hammer steady, and glanced at my sketches. You're building something tangible, he said, his voice warm. I looked at him, his face lit by the dim bulb, and felt a future taking shape, one where we weren't just surviving, but thriving. The Akron flea market buzzed under a hazy June sun, its gravel lot packed with card tables and shouting vendors hawking everything from used tires to homemade jams. My stall, a rickety setup draped with a blue tarp, displayed my first batch of children's overalls, sturdy denim double-stitched with waterproof cuffs for kids splashing in Rust Belt puddles. I'd sewn them late at night, my fingers calloused from the needle drawing on lessons from my past life boutique that crashed in 1992. Back then, I'd misjudged demand-stocking frilly dresses nobody could afford. Now in 1985, I knew Akron's working-class families wanted practical clothes cheap enough to stretch a mill worker's paycheck. Each pair sold for $5, and by noon, I'd pocketed $75, enough to cover Timmy's school shoes and our rent. Zach leaned against the stall, his coal-dusted hands stuffed in his army jacket, watching me haggle with a tired mother. "You're a natural," he said, his voice warm but quiet, like he was afraid to jinx it. I grinned, tucking a stray hair behind my ear. Learned the hard way. My past life had taught me more than sewing. It gave me a map of 1980s markets like the treasury notes we'd flipped for $5, $100 at Eddie's pawn shop. That cash from David's divorce settlement was our lifeline. I'd invested $2,000 more in fabric and a secondhand Singer machine, betting on my overalls to build something bigger. But the 1980s weren't kind to women like me. The bank rejected my loan application twice, and the clerk sneered. Newlyweds don't get credit without a man's collateral. Zach's VA status, a Purple Heart, and discharge papers had clinched our small business license through a vet buddy at City Hall. "You're carrying us," I told him, meaning it. He just shrugged, his green eyes soft. Timmy sat cross-legged under the tarp, sketching baseball diamonds in a notebook I'd bought him. His cough was gone, thanks to my nursing tricks, honey and aspirin honed in my past life patching up mill workers. He glanced up, shy, but warming to me. "Can I help sell?" he asked, clutching a pair of overalls. I ruffled his hair. "You're my best salesman, kid." His slight smile felt like a victory. In my past life, I'd never known Zach had adopted Timmy, a foster kid bruised by a system that failed him. Now I saw Zach's choice as an echo of his Vietnam scars, saving who he could when he could. Trouble stirred when Margaret's voice cut through the market's din. "Emma Carter, you gold-digging tramp!" She stormed toward my stall, her floral house dress flapping, a small crowd trailing her. "You stole my son's money and ran off with a coal hauler." Her accusations drew stares, and a vendor muttered. She heard that she had left David for cash. My stomach twisted. In my past life, Margaret's lies had turned neighbors against me, isolating me until I broke. Now I stood tall. "That $3,000 was my divorce settlement, Margaret," I said coldly. "David signed it fair and square. You got proof otherwise?" She sputtered, her face red. But Sarah, my neighbor, stepped forward, arms crossed. "Back off, Margaret. Emma's one of us." Joe, the mill worker, nodded, tossing an apple to Timmy. "She's a good person." Their support, forged in Akron's hardscrabble community, steadied me. Then Rachel appeared, her perfume sharp and cheap, a jade locket glinting at her throat. My blood ran cold. In my past life, she'd been my best friend, the one I'd confided in about David's cruelty. She'd betrayed me, stealing that locket, my mother's keepsake tied to the wealthy Henderson family in Boston, and posing as their lost daughter. Now she smirked, her curled hair bouncing. "Lovely stall, Emma. Heard David's up for deputy director. Too bad you ditched him." Her words were a jab meant to unravel me. I knew her game. She'd been sleeping with David, plotting to dump his illegitimate kid on me in my past life. I'd prepared for this. I pulled a secondhand tape recorder from my purse, bought for $15 at Eddie's. "Really? Rachel," I said, hitting play. Her voice crackled. "David's wife can't have kids. Dump the boy on her. She's soft. Give her a few bucks, she'll fold." The market fell silent, vendors gaping. Rachel's face went white. You set me up!" she shrieked, lunging for the recorder. I stepped back, letting her stumble into a crate of apples. The crowd murmured, some laughing, others whispering about David's kid. Rachel fled, her heels clicking on gravel. Zach, stacking fabric, looked at me, his jaw tight. "She's trouble," he said. I nodded, my fingers brushing the locket's twin hidden in my pocket. "She's just the start." That night, sewing by lamplight, I told Zach about Rachel's past life betrayal without mentioning Rebirth. "She's always wanted what I had," I said. He listened, his hands steady on a spool of thread. "You're stronger than her," he said. "Always were." His faith fueled me. My stall was just the beginning. I'd build a business, a family, a life, and no one would take it away. The Norfolk Naval Base was a world away from Akron's grit, its red brick barracks battered by salty Virginia winds. We'd moved in August 1985, Zach's transfer orders pulling us to this coastal outpost where seagulls screamed louder than the mill's looms. Our new home was a concrete box in the family compound, its walls scrawled with navy-strong graffiti, the air thick with fish and diesel. Supplies were scarce, sanitary pads sold out by the 10th of each month, forcing me to sew makeshift ones from old towels, a skill I'd picked up in my past life when Akron's co-op ran dry. The 1980s didn't make life easy for women, especially military wives, in a place where the commissary prioritized beer over basics. But I adapted, and my past life boutique failures taught me to make do with scraps. Zach came home from patrol, his uniform damp from the tide, his limp worse in the humid air. "Rough out there," he said, tossing his cap on the counter. Now sporting a navy blue cap I'd sewn, Timmy ran to him, holding up a school essay. "Got an A, Dad." Zach grinned, ruffling his hair. "That's my boy." Timmy's trust in me had grown. He'd started calling me Emma without flinching. As I cooked spam and beans that night, he shyly slid a drawing under my elbow, a family 3 stick figures under a sun. My throat tightened. In my past life, I'd never known kids thanks to David's taunts about my barrenness. Now, Timmy was mine, scars and all. We started a seafood sauce business with base wives pooling $30 to buy clams from local fishermen cheap at a third of city prices. My past life marketing savvy kicked in. I blended garlic, chili, and lemon, bottling it in mason jars labeled Coastal Star with a 5-pointed star Zach sketched. The wives, tough women like Lou, married to a petty officer, handled the cooking while I crunched numbers. "You're a wizard," Emma Lou said, stirring a steaming pot. Our first batch sold out at the base co-op, netting $200. Zach, hauling coal by day, helped bottle at night, his hands steady despite old shrapnel scars. "This could be big," he said, his eyes catching mine. I nodded, seeing a future beyond the base. Then Rachel showed up, her floral dress out of place amid the compound's grit. The jade locket at her throat, my mother's stolen in my past life, gleamed like a taunt. "Heard you're slinging sauce now," she said, her smile venomous. "David's deputy director, by the way. Asked about you." I knew her ploy in my past life. She'd fed me lies to keep me weak, then claimed the Henderson fortune with that locket. I forced a smile, my hand in my pocket, gripping my recorder. "Funny you mentioned David," I said. "I've got a tape you might recognize." Her eyes narrowed, but a Navy Jeep pulled up before I could play it. A man in a suit stepped out, Mr. Lang, a Boston investor, his hair slick with Brill cream. Miss Carter Lang said, his eyes locking on my hidden locket. "That jade, it's a Henderson heirloom. You're their lost daughter, kidnapped in '65. My heart skipped. In my past life, I'd learned this truth too late, dying before I could claim it. Now I deflected. "Just a trinket," I said, my voice steady. "You here for sauce?" Lang frowned, but handed me a card. "James Henderson's been searching for you. Call me." Rachel's gaze burned, her fingers twitching toward her fake locket. I knew she'd heard about Lang through David's mill gossip. She was here to steal my birthright again. That night, Zach was quiet, polishing his boots with a rag. "That Lang guy called you dear," he said, his voice tight. I caught his hand, feeling the tension in his grip. "It's business, Zach. He's after my locket, not me." He looked away, his jaw set. Later, I found his Vietnam diary in his duffel, its pages yellowed. 1975, Da Nang, it read. "Wrote David's letters home to Emma. Her smile's all I see under these stars." My breath caught. He'd silently loved me for a decade while I was blind to him. I sat beside him, the diary open. "You kept this?" I asked. He nodded, his ears reddening. "Couldn't let you go." I leaned into him, our shoulders touching, the locket heavy in my pocket. Rachel's threat loomed, but with Zach and Timmy, I'd face it not as a victim, but as a woman reborn. The Norfolk Naval Base hummed with the rhythm of the tide, its salt-soaked barracks starkly contrasting with Akron's coal-dusted streets. By September 1985, our family, Zach, Timmy, and I, had settled into a concrete apartment where the walls rattled with every passing destroyer. The air carried the tang of seaweed and engine grease, and the commissary shelves were bare by mid-month, forcing us to barter for basics. I'd sewn cotton pads from old shirts, a trick from my past life when Akron's co-op ran dry, navigating the 1980s military wife's reality, make do or do without. But I wasn't just surviving. My past life boutique failures had taught me resilience, and my nursing skills, honed while patching up mill workers, kept us steady. Here on this wind-battered coast, I was building something new. Our seafood sauce Coastal Star was a hit. Lou, a petty officer's wife, with a laugh like a foghorn, had rallied the base wives to scale up production. We'd pooled $30 to buy clams from fishermen, their buckets sloshing at dawn when the tide receded. My past life marketing savvy shaped the venture. I mixed garlic, chili, and lemon zest, bottling the sauce in mason jars with Zach's five-pointed star logo. We sold 50 jars at the co-op for $200, then 100 more, when a Navy cook bought a batch for the mess hall. "You're a damn genius," Emmylou said, her hands sticky with clam juice as we stirred a steaming pot in her kitchen. I smiled, tallying profits in my notebook. In my past life, I'd watched Akron's markets collapse under imports. Now I knew demand sailors craved bold flavors and families needed cheap condiments. Zach came home from coal duty, his uniform dusted with ash, his limp heavier in the humid air. He'd taken extra shifts to cover Timmy's school fees, his Vietnam scars aching but never complained about. "Sold another batch today," I told him, pointing to the jars stacked on our counter. He grinned, his green eyes catching the lamplight. "You're making this place smell better than the galley." Timmy, now 9, bounced in, clutching a school essay. "The teacher gave me a gold star," he said, showing a page titled My Family. It described me making pancakes, Zach fixing his bike, and our sauce jars shining like the ocean. My heart swelled. In my past life, I'd been childless David's taunts about my barrenness cutting deep. Now Timmy's trust was a gift, his foster home scars fading with every hug. But base life wasn't easy. The commissary's pad shortage hit hard during my period, leaving me curled up with cramps. Zach found me pale on the cot, my makeshift pads soaked. Without a word, he ran through the drizzle to Lou's returning with a bundle of cotton scraps she'd saved. "Learned this from a medic," he said, his ears pink, as he handed me neatly folded liners, their edges stitched with waterproof thread. I sipped the ginger tea he brewed, its warmth easing the pain. "You're too good to me," I said, half teasing. He shrugged, but his hand lingered on mine, rough and steady. Later, Timmy tiptoed in, placing a butterscotch candy by my pillow. "Don't hurt Emma," he whispered. I ruffled his hair, my eyes stinging. This family, pieced together from pain, was mine to protect. We took Coastal Star to a Navy expo, a makeshift fair on the base pier, where officers sampled local goods. I pitched to a commander, my voice steady despite my nerves. "Coastal Star's made by Navy wives, sir. Pure Virginia clams, bold enough for your crew." He bought 200 jars, a $1,000 order, and word spread. Zach helped load crates, his arms strong from years of hauling coal. "You're changing things, Emma," he said, his voice low with pride. I looked at him, his face weathered but open, and felt a future taking shape, one where we weren't just scraping by but thriving. Then Rachel's shadow crept back. I spotted her at the co-op, her fake jade locket glinting, her eyes scanning my sauce jars. "Moving up, huh?" she said, her voice syrupy. "David's running the mill now, says you'll crash and burn." I knew her game. In my past life, she'd undermined me, stealing my locket to claim the Henderson fortune. Now she was sniffing around, drawn by rumors of our expo success. I gripped my real locket, hidden under my collar, and smiled. "Tell David to watch his books. Lisa's got sticky fingers." Rachel flinched, her locket, a cheap imitation of my mother's heirloom. I'd deal with her soon, but for now, Coastal Star was my focus, our ticket to a life Rachel couldn't touch. The Norfolk base glittered under October's harvest moon, its piers alive with the clatter of cranes and the shouts of sailors. Our apartment, a concrete box with a leaky window, felt like a fortress as Coastal Star's profits grew. We'd cleared $2,500 from the expo to buy a used pickup and stockpile fabric for my overalls, which I sold at the base market. My past life boutique failures had taught me precision waterproof cuffs, denim, rigid enough for roughhousing kids. I sewed by lamplight, Zach winding thread, Timmy sketching stars on jar labels. "You're a machine, Emma," Zach said, his voice warm but tired. His coal shifts left him limping, his Vietnam shrapnel flaring in the damp air. I touched his hand, feeling the scars beneath. "We're a team," I said, meaning it. In my past life, I'd been alone, David's betrayal isolating me. Now Zach's quiet strength anchored me. Timmy thrived, his foster home fears easing. At school, he'd won a county essay contest, and his piece about Mom Emma's sauce was published in the Norfolk Ledger. "Read it to me," I said, stirring a pot of clams. His small but proud voice described our kitchen as a place where stars are born. I hugged him, my eyes wet. I'd never known this warmth in my past life, only David's taunts and Rachel's lies. But Rachel was back, her fake jade locket spotted at the market, her presence a reminder of the Henderson fortune she'd stolen in my past life. I kept my real locket, my mother sewn into my coat as a child, hidden its link to Boston's wealthy Henderson family, a secret I wasn't ready to face. Then Mr. Lang, the Boston investor, returned. He arrived at the base in a sleek Buick, his suit crisp despite the salt air. "Miss Carter," he said, his eyes locking on my collar, where the locket's red string peeked out. "That jade, it's the Henderson heirloom. You're their lost daughter, kidnapped in '65. My pulse raced. In my past life, I'd learned this truth on my deathbed, too late to act. Rachel had posed as the Henderson heir, using a fake locket to claim millions while I froze in an alley. Now I deflected. "Just a keepsake," I said, offering him a Coastal Star jar. "Here for business," Lang's gaze sharpened. "James Henderson's been searching for you, that locket's proof. Meet me in Boston." He handed me a card, his number embossed in gold. Zach overheard his jaw tight as he stacked sauce crates. "He called you dear," he said later, his voice low, almost wounded. I set down my sewing, meeting his eyes. "It's nothing, Zach. He wants the locket, not me." But his silence lingered, his hands fidgeting with a spoon. That night I found his Vietnam diary in his duffel, its pages brittle. 1975. "Da Nang," it read, "wrote David's letters to Emma. Her smile's all I see in this hell." A photo slipped out, me 19, laughing at a mill picnic, unaware Zach was watching. He'd silently loved me for a decade while I was trapped with David. I sat beside him, the diary open. "You kept this?" I asked, my voice soft. He nodded, his face flushed. "Couldn't let you go, Emma, even then." I leaned into him, our shoulders brushing the locket heavy against my chest. "You've got me now," I said, my words a promise. Rachel's presence grew bolder. I saw her at the co-op, whispering to a sailor, her fake locket gleaming. "Heard you're a big shot now," she said, her smile sharp. "David's deputy director. Says you'll fail." I knew she was here for the Henderson rumor spread by Lang's visit. In my past life, she'd waited 2 years to steal my identity. Now she was early greedy. I gripped my recorder, its tape ready, with her damning words from Akron. "Keep talking, Rachel," I said. "I've got evidence you don't want out." She paled, but smirked undeterred. I'd need more than a tape to stop her. She was aiming for Boston, and I had to protect my family first. Zach's diary stayed with me. His love was a quiet anchor. As we bottled the sauce, Timmy was asleep. I looked at him, his hands steady despite the pain in his leg. "We're going big," I said, sketching a new label. "Coastal Star's just the start." He smiled, his eyes deep with trust. "With you, I believe it." The ocean roared outside, but we were building an empire in our small kitchen, one jar, one stitch, one star at a time. The Norfolk Naval Base was cloaked in November's early dusk, the air sharp with salt, and the distant clang of shipyard cranes. Our Coastal Star sauce business was thriving, with $5,000 in profits, stacked in a tin box under our cot, enough to dream of a real shop. I sewed children's overalls by lamplight, their waterproof cuffs a hit at the base market, and my past life boutique failures guided every stitch. Timmy, now 9, helped label jars, his fingers smudged with ink from drawing stars. Zach, back from coal duty, limped worse in the cold, his Vietnam shrapnel flaring. "You're pushing too hard," I said, handing him coffee. He smiled, his green eyes tired but warm. "Gotta keep up with you, Emma." I'd been alone in my past life, broken by David's betrayal. Now with Zach and Timmy, I had a family worth fighting for. But Rachel's shadow loomed. Her fake jade locket, a copy of my mother's heirloom tying me to Boston's Henderson family, had appeared at the co-op, her whispers spreading about my stolen sauce recipe. I knew her game from my past life. She'd posed as the Henderson heir, leaving me to die in an alley. Now she was after my business, an identity drawn by rumors of Mr. Lang's visit. I kept my real locket hidden, its red string tucked under my collar, and carried my recorder with her damning Akron tape. "She's trouble," Zach warned, his voice low as we bottled sauce. I nodded, my resolve steel. I'd expose her, but first I had to protect what we'd built. Trouble struck at the co-op, a squat building where wives bartered for scarce goods. Zach had gone to reconcile our sauce ledgers, his ledger book stamped with our star logo. I was sewing when Lou burst into our apartment, her face pale. "Emma, hurry, Zach's in trouble." I grabbed Timmy's hand and ran, my heart pounding. The co-op alley was dim with sodium lights flickering. 3 punks, local thugs, their jackets patched with gang tags, surrounded Zach, glass and soy sauce pooling at his feet. One waved a switchblade, snarling, "Stay out of our business, soldier." Zach clutched the ledger, blood seeping through his sleeve from a training injury. I recognized the leader Tommy, a drifter Rachel had flirted with at the market. She'd hired them to sabotage us, likely to steal our profits, or discredit me before I could claim the Henderson name. I snatched a shovel, leaning against the co-op wall, its handle rough under my palms. "Back off," I shouted, my voice cutting through the damp air. Zach saw me, his eyes wide. "Emma, stay back!" But Tommy lunged, his blade flashing. Zach twisted, shielding the ledger, and took the slash across his ribs, grunting as he fell to one knee. The ledger slipped, pages splaying in the mud. I swung the shovel, catching Tommy's arm, but Navy MPs arrived, their whistles piercing. The thugs scattered, cursing, as Lou screamed, "Stop it!" Her voice was hollow, and her husband's Navy rank was useless here. I dropped to Zach's side, his blood soaking my hands. "You idiot," I whispered, pressing my scarf to his wound. He managed a weak smile. "Ledger's safe. July's profits. Page 3. At the base hospital, the fluorescent lights buzzed, cold and stark. The nurse cut away Zach's uniform, revealing a jagged gash across his abdomen. My past life nursing kicked in. I checked his pulse, steady but fast, and held his hand. "No organs hit," the doctor said, stitching him up. He kept saying, "Your name, ma'am." I knotted my throat tight. In my past life, Zach had died alone, coughing blood in the rain after visiting my grave. Now he'd risked everything for our dream. I rifled through his shoulder bag for a towel and found a tin box. Inside was a 1979 diary. David wrote a letter to Emma today. Her smile's all that keeps me going. A photo fell out, me laughing at the 1975 Mill picnic, unaware Zach was watching. My eyes stung. He'd loved me through 2 lives, silently carrying my light. Timmy sat by the bed, clutching Zach's purple heart. "Is Dad okay?" he asked, his voice small. I hugged him. "He's tough, kid like you." Zach stirred, his voice raspy. "You okay, Emma?" I squeezed his hand, the diary's weight heavy in my mind. "We're okay. But Rachel's not." I'd leak her scam to the Norfolk Ledger, using my locket and tape to bury her. Zach's sacrifice wasn't just for the ledger, it was for us, for the family we'd built. As he slept, I swore to protect it no matter the cost. The Norfolk Ledger's front page hit the base like a grenade, its headline, "Bold Local Woman's Sauce Empire Tied to Lost Heiress." My photo, holding a coastal star jar, sat beside a shot of my jade locket, its intricate carvings unmistakable. I'd leaked the story myself, slipping a Polaroid of the locket to a Ledger reporter with a note. "Check Rachel Dawson's claims." It was December 1985, and Zach was out of the hospital, his ribs bandaged, but his spirit unbroken. The attack at the co-op had lit a fire in me. Rachel's thugs had targeted our ledger to ruin Coastal Star, likely to weaken me before she claimed the Henderson fortune with her fake locket. In my past life, she'd succeeded posing as the kidnapped Henderson daughter while I died in disgrace. Not this time. I stood at the base market selling overalls and sauce, Timmy handing out samples. His essay, "Mom Emma's Stars," was framed on our stall, a county prize that drew smiles from Navy wives. Zach, leaning on a crate, watched me haggle, his eyes warm, despite the pain of his stitches. "You're a force," he said, his voice low. I grinned, but my hand rested on my recorder, its tape holding Rachel's Akron confession, her plot to dump David's illegitimate kid on me. I'd saved it knowing she'd strike again. My past life knowledge, marketing, nursing, betrayal had prepared me for this fight. The 1980s were brutal for women entrepreneurs, with banks scoffing at my loan applications, but Navy wives like Lou spread word of Coastal Star, and our profits hit $10,000, enough for a shop lease. Rachel appeared at the market, her fake locket gleaming, her seagull print dress too bright for the gray morning. "Nice press, Emma," she sneered, fingering her locket. "But Mr. Lang says I'm the Henderson heir." I knew she'd charmed Lang's aide, flashing her fake jade to piggyback on my story. I smiled, pulling my real locket from my collar. "Funny, Rachel. I remember you buying that at Eddie's pawn shop for $30. Borrowed my money for it, too." Her face paled, but she pressed closer, her voice low. "David is the deputy director now. He'll bury you." I hit play on the recorder, her voice crackling. "Dump the kid on her. She's soft." The crowd gasped, Navy wives whispering. Rachel lunged, but Lou blocked, her arms crossed. "Get lost, fraud." That afternoon, Mr. Lang arrived at the base, his Buick gleaming. "Miss Carter," he said, eyeing my locket, "this confirms it. You're James Henderson's daughter." I nodded, my heart steady. I'll meet him, but on my terms. I handed him the ledger article and my locket's photo. Its carvings matched Henderson's records. Check Rachel's. It's fake. Lang's aide, flustered, admitted Rachel had approached him claiming the locket as hers. The next day, the ledger ran a follow-up fraud exposed Rachel Dawson arrested for counterfeit scam. She'd been caught at the dock, her locket cracking to reveal cheap stone dust. In my past life, she'd fooled the Hendersons for years. Now her greed had tripped her up early. David's downfall came faster. I'd tipped Lisa, his accountant mistress, about his siphoning mill funds using my past life memory of their scam. She turned on him, reporting his embezzlement to save herself. The ledger's next issue showed David at the Akron mill gate, mobbed by workers, his uniform stained with rotten eggs. Deputy director under investigation, the headline read. I showed Zach the paper. His bandaged ribs were still tender. Lisa flipped, I said. He nodded, his eyes fierce. They don't touch you again. In my past life, Lisa had fallen for David, landing in prison while he thrived. Now I'd rewritten their ending. Timmy ran to me, waving a new essay. Called it Mom's Fight. He said, his grin wide. I hugged him, my locket warm against my chest. Zach joined us, his hand on my shoulder. You're unstoppable, he said. I looked at him, his scars a map of his love, and felt the Henderson meeting looming. I'd face it not as a lost daughter, but as Emma Carter wife, mother survivor. Coastal Stars jars gleamed on our stall stars in a world I'd reclaimed. The Chicago Trade Show of December 1985 was a whirlwind of cigarette smoke and clinking glasses, its convention hall packed with vendors hawking everything from tractor parts to canned soups. I stood at our Coastal Star booth, a navy blue suit I'd sewn myself, hugging my frame, the jade locket, my mother's heirloom proof of my Henderson lineage, gleaming at my throat. My past life boutique failures had taught me presentation. Our booth, draped in denim, showcased waterproof children's overalls and mason jars of Coastal Star sauce, their star logos catching the fluorescent lights. Zach, his ribs still bandaged from the co-op attack, stood beside me, his navy uniform crisp despite the long train ride from Norfolk. Sitting clutching a sketch pad, Timmy drew stars for buyers' kids, his shy grin winning them over. My heart swelled. In my past life, I'd died alone, betrayed by David and Rachel. Now with my family, I was rewriting my story. Our profits, $10,000 from sauce and overalls, had funded this trip, but the 1980s were tough for women like me. Buyers at the show, mostly men in polyester suits, raised eyebrows at a Navy wife pitching business. Where's your husband's approval? One sneered. I pointed to Zach, his lieutenant's bars glinting. Right there, backing me up. Zach's presence was quiet but fierce, and doubters were silenced. My past life marketing savvy guided me. I pitched Coastal Star as Virginia's boldest flavor made by Navy families and the overalls as tough enough for Midwest winters. A British buyer, blonde and sharp-eyed, lifted a pair, noting the waterproof cuffs. He said kids can splash without soaking, signing for 50,000 units, $250,000. Southeast Asian vendors introduced by Mr. Lang, the Boston investor, ordered 10,000 sauce jars. By day 3, we'd racked up $1.2 million in contracts of fortune in Reagan's economy. Mr. Lang arrived mid-show, his Buick's polish out of place among Chicago's grit. Miss Carter, he said, eyeing my locket, James Henderson's here. He wants to meet his daughter. My pulse quickened. In my past life, Rachel had stolen my identity, claiming the Henderson fortune while I froze in an Akron alley. Now, with Rachel arrested for fraud and David under investigation for embezzlement, I was ready. Lang led me to a private suite where James Henderson waited, his silver hair combed back, eyes wet behind wire-rimmed glasses. Emma, he said, voice breaking your locket, it's hers. He held up a matching jade piece, its carvings fitting mine perfectly. My mother, he explained, had sewn it into my coat before I was kidnapped in 1965, a clue he'd chased for 20 years. I hugged him, tears spilling, but held firm. I'm not just your daughter, I said. I'm Emma Carter, a Navy wife and businesswoman. James unfolded a document, his hands trembling. 51% of Henderson shipping is yours, he said, the room gasping. A man in a Hong Kong-style suit stood Mr. Li Lang's associate, his smile stiff. A mainland girl can't run a shipping empire, he said. I recognized him from my past life. He'd short-sold Henderson stock, collapsing the company after Rachel's fraud. Zach stepped forward, his voice ice-cold. She's built more than you ever will. His Navy contacts had tipped us off. Lee was linked to a smuggling ring funneling cash through Norfolk. I handed Lang a folder bank records I'd pulled through Lou's husband, a Navy clerk showing Lee's illicit transfers. Check his accounts, I said. Lang nodded, his face grim. Lee paled, retreating as security loomed. Zack pulled me close that night, his uniform swapped for a borrowed suit. You owned that room, he said, his hand on my locket. Asleep on a cot, Timmy clutched his sketchpad, a star drawn for Mom. I leaned into Zack, the city's lights glittering outside. In my past life, I'd been nothing. Now I was a Henderson, a wife, a mother with $1 million empire. But Lee's threat lingered, and I knew the fight wasn't over. I'd face it with Zack and Timmy, not as a lost heir, but as Emma Carter, reborn. Spring, 1995. Boston's Repulse Bay penthouse glowed under a 4th of July sky. Fireworks bursting over the harbor like stars reborn. I stood on our balcony, a Chanel suit replacing my 1985 denim, my jade locket now whole, its twin piece from James Henderson clinking softly against Zack's. He stood beside me, his captain's bars glinting, promoted last year for his civil military projects. Timmy, now Zachary Jr., 19, home from West Point, sported cadet tabs, his grin wide as he recounted a textbook Norfolk operation from his military history class. Mom, Dad's a legend, he said, tossing a chicken leg into his bowl. I laughed, flipping open Forbes, its cover, showing us Zack in uniform, me in my suit, headlined, "From Rust Belt to Real Estate Empire, a veteran couple's golden decade." Coastal Star and my overalls had grown into Blue Rise Group, a $500 million conglomerate under Henderson Shipping. My past life's pain. David's betrayal, Rachel's theft. My death in an alley was a distant shadow. In 1985, after the Chicago trade show, we'd returned to Norfolk, our $1.2 million orders fueling a factory lease. I'd faced James Henderson again, accepting my role as his heir, but staying Emma Carter Navy wife. Lee's smuggling ring collapsed when Zack's Navy contacts raided his Norfolk accounts, and his arrest splashed across the ledger. David, convicted of embezzlement, lost everything. Lisa's testimony, spurred by my tip, sent him to prison. By 1987, I'd launched Blue Rise blending sauce and apparel, hiring Navy wives and Akron mill workers. The 1980s glass ceiling cracked under my persistence, though banks still demanded Zack's signature. "You're the boss," he'd said, signing without a blink, unlike David, who'd fought me over pennies. Timmy's growth was my heart's triumph. His foster scars faded. By 1990, he called me Mom, unprompted, his essays winning national awards. At West Point, he studied strategy inspired by Zack's Norfolk sting. He told me, "You taught me to fight smart sketching stars," in his cadet notebook. Zack's love, steady through Vietnam's ghosts, anchored us. His 1975 diary, found after the co-op attack, stayed in our safe. A photo of me at the mill picnic reminds me of his decade-long devotion. In my past life, I'd died alone. Now I had a family, a legacy. Norfolk's base was a memory, its salt air replaced by Boston's polish. But I never forgot Akron's grit. On a 1993 visit, I saw David by a dumpster scavenging bottles, his mill uniform filthy. He'd been released broke, the mill bankrupt. "Emma," he'd rasped, eyes bloodshot. "You won." I shook my head. I lived. Zack beside me clicked his walkie-talkie, signaling a news crew. The LED billboard across the street lit up my face, cutting a ribbon for Blue Rise's new tower. David stared, his scream raw, as he saw my empire sky and clouds reflecting off glass like flawless jade. In 1995, James Henderson joined us on the balcony, his wheelchair creaking. "You saved my company," he said, his hand on mine. In my past life, Rachel's fraud had gutted Henderson Shipping. Now, under my leadership, it thrived. Rachel, post-prison, vanished into obscurity, her fake locket a forgotten scam. Margaret, caught stealing in Akron, faced jail time, her venom silenced. Our penthouse, with Timmy's cadet photos and Zack's medals, was a testament to our rise. I leaned into Zack, his arm warm around me. "What are you thinking?" he asked, draping a blanket over my shoulders. I smiled, the locket clinking. "That 1985 storm when I ran to the mill, it led me here." The harbor sparkled, our wine glasses catching the light. Blue Rise's logo glowed across the skyline, a star born from rust, love, and a second chance.